Hello, friends, and welcome to Christmas at St. Mark's Church. We are so excited and humbled that you decided to join us for this very special holiday event. First thing you can expect, you're going to hear some great music that you can sing along to. You're going also to hear a message that's been changing lives for thousands of years, and we believe still changes lives today. And then finally, at the very end of our time together, you want to find a candle, a cell phone, anything to light up your space, because we're going to have a candlelight moment at the very end of our time together today. So, hey, before we get all that started and the band fires up, I want to introduce you to the one who started it all.
It's remarkable to think that a baby boy born in a stable, no prestige, no privilege, no social media or social status, political campaigns or private airplanes, and yet he turned BC into AD. He flipped the world on its head. He's the most famous name around the globe, inspired the most read book ever written. He reconnected us to heaven and in turn brought heaven down to earth. And now he offers us redemption, a fresh start, freedom, so that we can hold our heads high and march through this life knowing that we are never alone, that every woman and man, boy and girl, to all of us who feel like we have nothing left, nothing to bring, that we can know that God is smiling at us, that He's loving us, that we are enough. So light up that Christmas tree, stand under the mistletoe, surround yourself with the ones you love the most, and together, let's celebrate the greatest news this world has ever known.
They told me, pa-ra-pa-pa-pa, a newborn king to see, pa-ra-pa-pa-pa, and our finest gifts we bring, pa-ra-pa-pa-pa, to lay before the king, pa-ra-pa-pa-pa, ra-pa-pa-pa, ra-pa-pa-pa. So to honor him, pa-ra-pa-pa-pa, when we come, hey, 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 oh, oh,
little baby, pa-ra-pa-pa-pa, I am a poor boy too, pa-ra-pa-pa-pa, I have no gift to bring, pa-ra-pa-pa-pa, that's fit to give a king, pa-ra-pa-pa-pa, ra-pa-pa-pa, ra-pa-pa-pa.
shall I play for you, pa-ra-pa-pa-pa, on my drum? Hey, hey, oh, oh, very naughty, pa-ra-pa-pa-pa. He Me and my drum. Me and my drum. Me and my drum. Me and my drum.
Faithful, come joyful, come praising. Jesus is born in Bethlehem.
Oh, come and behold him, the King of the ages. Jesus is born in Bethlehem. Jesus is born. Hey! Let us adore. Let us adore. Let us adore.
Welcome to St. Mark's Church. We're so glad that you're here. And we're so thankful that we can take this service and broadcast it out around our community and further to the world even. My name is Chris Yingle. I'm part of the creative team. I'm so happy to be here. And at this church, we believe that this season is very important for our faith. And so we're thankful that you've chosen to spend it with us.
Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Peace on earth and mercy mild, God and sinners reconciled. Joyful all ye nations rise, join the triumph of the skies. With angelic hosts proclaim, Christ is born in Bethlehem. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Sing glory to the King. Christ by highest heaven adored, Christ the everlasting Lord. Late in time, behold him come, offspring of a virgin's womb. Veiled in flesh, the Godhead sees. Hail the incarnate deity, pleased with us in flesh to dwell. Jesus our Emmanuel. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn
It says in Isaiah that God is He who made a way through the sea, a path through the mighty waters. And I think in this season we tend to think of God as this baby in a manger. But I like to connect him to this God that created the entire universe, that created me and still makes a way. And so I want to take this moment that we can all kind of worship together, because we have a God that makes a way. Let's do it. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. Yes, it is. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who
worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. Yes, that is who you are.
'Cause you are
Yes,
waymaker,
you
miracle
are.
worker, promise
Promise
keeper,
keeper.
light in the darkness, my God,
That is who you are. Yes, it is. Amen.
Hi, everybody, and I'm sure you're all familiar with this. It's an old cliche that goes, "Timing can be everything." Maybe you heard the story about the woman, and she wanted to take an extended vacation in Europe, but her husband was in retail, and it was just right at the height of his very busy season. So he said, "Look, why don't you go?" And so she connected with a tour group, and her trip included stops in London, Paris, Rome, and then they wound up the trip in Greece. Well, on the second leg of the trip, she was talking to her husband, and he said, "Honey, I got some bad news, but James," and James is the family cat, he said, "James passed away." Well, she just started bawling, and when she finally regained her composure, she said, "Why are you so insensitive? You don't have any consideration for my feelings at all? All you men are just alike." And her husband said, "Well, what would you want me to say?" And she said, "Well, when I was in London, it was just last week, you could have said, 'Hey, I found James up in the tree and I had to coach him down.' And then when I got to Paris, you could have said, 'While I was trying to rescue James, he had a fall and he hurt himself. It was pretty bad.' And then when I got to Rome, you could have said, 'The vet patched up James, but I don't think he's doing that well.' And then when I got to Greece, you could have said, 'Sweetheart, I got some bad news, but James just couldn't recover and he passed away from his injuries.' But no, you had to be totally insensitive." Well, he was trying to explain, and then his wife said, "By the way, how's Mom doing?" And her husband said, "Well, right now she's up in the tree." The guy just had some really bad timing. You ever been in a situation where you felt like that the timing was just wrong? We come here today to celebrate the remarkable timing when God stepped into our story. Galatians chapter 4, the Apostle Paul is trying to explain Christmas for the first time to a group of Christians. And they're first generation, so they have no background at all. They don't know anything about Christmas. And he's trying to explain that this was all about God's timing, and God just highlighted a few basics. Well, this is what he said. He wrote a letter to the Galatians, and he said, "Before Christ came, we were like children. But when the right time came, God sent his son. He sent him to purchase our freedom and adopt us as his very own sons and daughters." It's absolutely remarkable, isn't it, that a baby could make that much difference. And then his birth just set off a chain reaction of events. And those events have echoed now across 2 millennia. And the message resonates in this worship center tonight and out through the World Wide Web as far as the world is. I'm convinced, like many of you, that something began that night in that tiny Mideastern village, and it had all the implications for eternity when God decided it's time. This is the right time for his unique birth announcement. The Waymaker had arrived, light in the darkness, the miracle worker, the promise keeper. In fact, a whole bunch of promises were sealed and delivered that night. And we're going to talk about that. Hey, look, thanks for making SMC a part of your 2020 Christmas. This is our 43rd straight year of celebrating Christmas Eve services. And, we have a few people, believe it or not, who have never missed a single service in all of those years. Absolutely incredible record. And some of those folks are at a season in life where they're not going to be able to be here this week, but they're going to be watching virtual. So can we give them credit? Just to say, hey. All right, now, I want you all to do me one quick favor, and you can take 3 seconds or less to do this, but I want you to pull your mask down. Hold your breath and let me look. Pull your mask down real fast and let me look, because I haven't seen some of you since March the 8th. All right, okay, good. It's good to see everybody. So let me ask you, do you remember the last promise that you made? I'll get that report finished before December 31st. I promise I'll return your call. I promise I'm never going to bring it up again. I promise it's going to be different this time. I promise I won't tell anybody. I promise I won't get mad. I promise I'm going to quit. We all make promises. Some we keep, some we don't. Some we don't even remember that we made. But I'll tell you this, when a promise is kept, it's a good thing. When a promise is broken, it can lead to hurt and disappointment, and sometimes that pain can linger for a very long time. Some of you here can tell a story from your childhood when an adult that you trusted broke a promise, and it has taken you a long time to kind of push aside the anger and the frustration. Was it when your company, they started stringing you along and they kept saying, we promised that there's a promotion and it's coming soon, but it never happened? Was it when somebody betrayed your friendship? Maybe when a marriage promise was compromised? We live in a suspicious world. There's a lot of distrust, and sometimes we just get tired of playing the fool. I understand that. We don't like to get burned just time and again by people we trusted. Some of us decide then, so what we're going to do is we're going to build this large, sturdy wall around our heart so that nobody can get close enough to hurt us ever again. Broken promises. They can sometimes follow us for decades, and the memories can trouble us for a long time, sometimes even torment us. There are times even when it makes it hard for us to trust anybody. Broken promises can also influence how deeply we decide to put our trust and confidence in God. And one of the messages of the Christmas season is that God came here so that he could break down every wall of distrust that was hanging over our heads. So I'm here tonight to remind you that at the very core of the Christmas story is a promise kept. One of the 4 biographies of Jesus recorded in the New Testament scriptures, it's a book named after the man who wrote it. His name is Matthew. And there's a phrase that Matthew uses over and over again in his gospel. In fact, he does so 20 times. Look at these words carefully. Matthew said, all of this happened so that what the Lord had spoken through the prophet came true. Now, every time you see those words in the Gospel of Matthew, it's just his way of saying, hey, just so you know, what I'm talking about right now, I'm linking to a promise that God made a long time ago, maybe hundreds of years ago. Most of you are familiar with the simplicity of the Christmas story recorded in the New Testament. If so, then you know that it's a fascinating story of a small group of sheep herders who were assigned to the night shift, and that was a pretty boring time to be on duty. At night, the sheep were usually confined to a sheep pen, and basically all the shepherds had to do was just kind of keep watch and make sure that predators did not somehow or another invade the flock. But on this particular night, it wasn't a predator, but it was some kind of otherworldly creature that interrupted their night. We call it an angel. And this angel steps on the center stage in the story to deliver a very precise, different kind of message. So Bob, come on, are we going to be talking about angels and stuff like that? Because I get weirded out about all that, really. I understand that sometimes it's hard to wrap your brain around the supernatural. But if you believe in God, how hard can it be to believe that God might sometimes step into that supernatural and do something that we don't expect? So the angel said to the shepherds, I've got good news for you. Today your Savior, the Messiah, was born in David's city. Messiah, the Hebrew word is Mashiach. It means anointed one. Now, the only people who ever get anointed are kings. So that was a way of that angel saying, hey, there's a king that's been born tonight. And in that moment, you get just a little bit of hint, maybe one of the first hints that God has kept his promises. More than any of the other of the sacred writings, the Bible has never been afraid to allow us to put it under the magnifying glass and take a close-up look at it. The scriptures are loaded then with specific descriptions and predictions. And almost all of them can be tested by history. In the beginning, God created everything. Now, astronomers and stargazers and stargazing scientists will tell you that the universe literally came out of nothing, which is really kind of strange, about 14 billion years ago. Genesis 1 says that God speaks. He speaks everything into existence, and God announces it's good. It's very good, but almost as you would expect, you know, when people got injected into the equation, well, there was a little bit of rebellion and defiance that started to show up in the story. In Genesis 3, we call it the fall. I like to sometimes call it the crash and burn. But these two people make a fatal mistake. They decide that, you know what, we think we can get along just fine without God at all. And the scriptures say that God said, if you continue in this contempt, if you just decide that you're going to continue to be insubordinate, then I'm going to give you your wish. You'll be able to be without me here and on the other side of eternity. And so we start to get a clear picture of how God is going to deliver justice to their noncompliance. God says, I'm not going to look away forever. I'm not going to just let you do whatever you want to do forever and ever. I'm not going to turn away all the time from your disregard and disobedience. And God said, the day is coming, I promise you, when I will eventually deal with your rebellion once and for all. In fact, in Genesis 3, God says, there's coming a time, and I'm going to step in to the story, and I'm going to make everything right. Have you ever thought about that? That might be the first promise that was ever made in all of history. Now, let's hit fast forward and we'll jump over to Genesis 12 chapters later. And God says to a man living in the middle of nowhere, you couldn't find it with a GPS. The man's name was Abraham, and God promises Abraham and his wife Sarah that their descendants will eventually be responsible for carrying the message, the story of God to the whole world. But there was only one major setback in the story. Abraham is 75 years old, Sarah 65, and they don't have any descendants. They don't have any kids at all. And to top it all off, God makes this promise, I'm going to honor your descendants, and then nothing happens for the next 25 years, not even the slightest hint of some morning sickness. Nothing. That's a long time to wait around for a promise to be kept. But then at the age of 99, Abraham's 90-year-old wife, she does get pregnant. Now you think about that. She's the only card-carrying member of AARP buying Pampers and Depends at Walmart on the same visit. Skip ahead a few more chapters, Genesis 15, and God decides to seal the promise with something that we call a covenant. A covenant, it's more than a promise, really. It's an agreement between two promises. Yours, you make a promise and I make one. Only this covenant was radically different. God tells Abraham, he says, hey, look, Abe, I'm going to keep my promise even if you don't. I mean, it sounded scandalous. Who's ever heard of such an agreement like that? But this is the pivotal moment in the story of God. And soon, Abraham and Sarah give birth to their first son, Isaac. And this is the beginning of the nation Israel. These two octogenarians, they laughed at God when he told them that they were going to have a son in their old age. But watch this. Now, God is going to get the last laugh. Isaac will someday have a son, Jacob. Jacob and his wife Rachel will eventually have a whole flock of sons, 2 basketball teams, and each has a sub. 12 kids, 12 boys in all. The story continues. We get over to the book of Exodus, and God says, I'm going to give you what's called the Torah, the law. These are the laws and demands, the covenant, the commandments of God. They are the first 5 books of the Bible. Well, these people are starting to gradually learn a little something about the character of God, and God has expectations, and these are the ways we're supposed to live with integrity and excellence. And then God begins to drop little hints along the way that if we consistently are unable to keep the law, watch this now, that He will be forced to step in right in the middle of things. God sends a whole bunch of prophets, 16 in all, covering several hundred years, each one encouraging these rebellious people to, you get your life in order, or one day you're going to face the outrage and the consequences of your defiance and your spiritual infidelity. Finally, these prophets begin to talk about the promised one. They say God is going to send the promised one someday. They call him Messiah, the anointed one, the king. And then when we get to the end of the Hebrew scriptures that we call the Old Testament, if you go back and look through those prophetic words, what you find are 300 predictions about what this Messiah is going to be like. And for the first time ever, I'm going to show you all 300 of them. No, not really, because we'd have to be here till Saturday. But so what I'm going to do is I am going to show you a few. And what you're going to find out, though, is that these promises are polarizing and controversial. Oh, no. Oh, come on, Bob. I mean, why do we don't want to come to church on Christmas and have to be faced with controversy. Let me show you. Watch this. In Isaiah 7, the prophet says that this Messiah and rescuer will be born of a virgin. Is that controversial enough for you? Remember now that we're starting to move in the supernatural realm. So how hard can a mysterious, unexplainable pregnancy be if you are becoming accustomed to the supernatural? If the same God who created life, it's now called abiogenesis. That means creating life from nothing. If God can do that, then I figure that a virgin birth is probably not that hard. Then the prophet Micah, he says that this Messiah will be born in Bethlehem. Now, that story doesn't surprise any of us. These two teenagers, they have to travel from their hometown to Bethlehem by order of the Roman emperor, who was Caesar Augustus. Augustus was in charge of the whole world, at least the only world that these people knew. And his kingdom, which was the empire of Rome, is large, and it demands a lot of revenue. And what better way for governments to take in a little more money? Can you say taxes? Well, Rome, they maintained the strongest military in the world in those days because they didn't want any of the nations around them to have some kind of fantasy thought that maybe they could hostilely take over. So a large army takes a lot of money. And it also requires a well-built highway system because you have to be able to move your troops from place to place. So a profitable tax policy was a big deal. So Augustus says, I'm ordering that every citizen should return to their town of family origin. And you go there and sign the tax registry so that the demands that have been placed on the Roman economy can be settled and so that we don't sink into a recession. Well, Joseph, this Bethlehem baby's adoptive father, his family ancestry traces all the way back to Bethlehem. So Joseph does the right thing. He heads out for a 4 or 5 day, 90-mile trip to perform his civic duty, and he takes with him his seriously pregnant teenage fiance. Now, other prophets, they also talk about how this Messiah is going to be a preacher, and he's going to preach compelling sermons, and he will perform impressive miracles, and he will be without sin. Can you imagine? Now, this is not like your brother-in-law who sits at the Christmas dinner table and seems to know everything and never does anything wrong. But even your brother-in-law would probably not admit to being sinless. Psalm 41 says that this king will be betrayed by a friend. And then the prophet Zechariah says he will be sold out for 30 pieces of silver. And all of these prophecies are written centuries before Jesus. And what's the point? What did Matthew say? This has been done to fulfill what was promised by the prophets. The Old Testament contains 300 specific predictions, and each one is as unique as your thumbprint. So what are the odds that one person could do this? I'm sure you've had an experience or two in your life when something happened and you thought, wow, there's no way that could have been a coincidence. How many of you know a little something about the laws of probability? I have a book called The Book of Odds. Now, it's a know-nothing book, really, but it's got anything and everything that you ever wanted to know about what are the odds of just about anything in life. Well, I've been flipping through the book for the last couple of weeks, just looking at the odds of stuff. And, the only thing really that I don't go buy the book, for goodness sakes, because the only thing that I found it useful for was to create a sermon illustration. But other than that, it's basically useless. Like they said, they figured out that 23% of us would exercise if we had more time. 1 in 16 teenagers never wears a seatbelt. Go figure. 22% of the people who apply to Duke University get accepted. Some of you are thinking, how'd you get in? These guys, they figure out the odds for anything that you can imagine. In fact, I'm going to give you, let's take a little test. I want you to look at this list. Now, struck by lightning, injured by a chainsaw, win an Olympic medal, audited by the IRS, a meteor strikes your house, or injured by a toilet. Okay, now, these are all scattered around, so you just take a quick look and see if you can quickly link up where you think these odds are. So just kind of figure it out. Okay, let's see the answers. There they are. The only one that troubles me, I got a 1 in 160 chances of getting audited by the IRS. The rest of them, I'm pretty cool about the toilet thing there. I think I can get by that one. But, okay, this is what these guys do. All right, now, several years ago, a math professor on the West Coast gathered some grad students together to figure out what are the odds of one person fulfilling just 8 of the Old Testament promises and prophecies about the Messiah. It is 1 chance in 100 million billion. That is 1 in 10 to the 17th power. Now, some of you are really heavy-handed with mathematics and probability and statistics, but, quite frankly, most of us are pretty clueless about all this. So let me see if I can sort of dumb this down, at least for me and maybe for some of you, and we'll think about it like this. Let's take the state of North Carolina. Why not? Here we are, and we're not the biggest state in the union by any stretch, but we're a decent-sized state. Now, I want you to imagine that the entire state of North Carolina is now covered 2 feet deep in silver dollars, Manio to Murphy. And then we take this 1 silver dollar, and I'm going to put a little red dot on it right beside Lady Liberty here. And this, by the way, was minted in 2020, so this is a brand new silver dollar. And then we are going to we're going to mix this silver dollar in with all the others, and we're going to put a blindfold on you. And then you can take as long as you want to. You can take yours if you want to. And you're going to be able to trudge through this ocean of silver dollars. What are the odds that you are going to reach down in all of those silver dollars and pull out this 2020 coin on the first try? That's the odds we're talking about of one person fulfilling all the promises in the Old Testament. Now, if we say, what about 50 of these 300 prophecies about Jesus? That number is 1 in the 10 to the 157th power. That's a big number. You want to see how big it is? There it is. My friends, this is not just long odds. It's a mathematical impossibility for one person. I want you to understand that when we casually talk about the fact that a special baby born 2,020 years ago in a faraway place, recognized by less than 15 people at his birth, and I'm just kind of estimating that based on shepherds and magi, it's more than just an amazing story of God keeping his promise. There's no way this can be random. Come on. God had his hands all over this moment in human history from the very beginning. God is serious about keeping his word. So, when was the last time somebody made a promise to you and they kept it? They came through. Isn't it true that whenever somebody makes a promise and they keep it, doesn't it take that relationship just a little bit deeper? Sure it does. We call that trust. We trust people more if they're known for their consistent ability to keep promises. My heart is so soft these days with older couples who have not just lived a long time, but when their decades-long marriages of pure devotion have never wilted, never withered. They've gone through challenges and all kinds of things. And when I see that, let me tell you something. I sit up and take notice. I talk to people like that. These are my friends of more than 40 years. Some of you know them. This is Ray and Edith Lennons. They just live right there. Right on the other side of that wall, no kidding, right through the woods there. The Lennons have been a part of this church for a really long time. Their kindness is extended to Susan and me and our family. We could never repay them. They were such good neighbors. Ray and Edith both reached their 100th birthday just a few months ago and celebrated their 77th wedding anniversary on March the 6th of this year. Now look at that. Now here's the point. If you've ever seen someone keep a promise, decade after decade, it'll take your breath away. Promises made, promises honored, promises kept. Now, I don't expect you to remember any of these statistics or numbers or the prophecies from all those ancient narratives, but I do want you to remember that God is a promise keeper, and that when Jesus was born, it was like all the dots were connected. The king showed up. And let's be clear, there's only one Messiah king. There were a lot of people who came along, some even during Jesus' life, and they developed a modest following, and they claimed to be the long-awaited Messiah. And most of them said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to assemble an army, and we're going to fight the enemies of Israel, and we're going to drive them out of our country, and we're going to live free. But none of those, not a single one of those so-called Messiahs could fulfill even one of those ancient prophecies. There was only one who connected all the dots. It had nothing to do with military power. It wasn't about a coup d'etat takeover. Jesus said, I have come not to be served, but to serve others and to give my life as a ransom for many. Jesus knows his business here was not to overthrow Rome. It was his job had nothing to do with some type of political coup no, his purpose was to subdue darkness and defeat evil. But it was not going to happen by gathering an impressive army and go to war. This Messiah king has come to serve, give, love, teach, and die to gain a victory. Now, I know some of you cringe. Every year I'll get one or two emails. So on Christmas Eve, when I attach Christmas Eve to the cross, but I mean, it's the only way to make the Christmas story make sense, y'all. Christmas and Easter don't make any sense without the other. The truth about every one of us is that we created this gap, this sin gap. Our sin and defiance, we created this great chasm between ourselves and God. It's just our nature. We all do it. And there's nothing any of us can do to close the gap. If those of you who have read some of the Bible, have you ever seen a place in the Bible where it says, hey, look, here are the 12 things you can do to make everything right between you and God? No, there is no to-do list because that's not the way it works. We need a Savior to step into this gap, someone who will stand between us and God, between us and evil, and make things right. It's a promise made, it's a promise kept. Isaiah, the great prophet of Israel, he writes about this promise 700 years before the birth of Jesus. Look at this prediction. The people who walk in darkness will see a great light. For those who live in a land of deep darkness, a light will shine. For a child is born to us, a son is given to us. The government will rest on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. His government and its peace will never end. Christmas is that moment in history when God steps down. God accepts a demotion from somewhere in the heavens, steps down onto planet Earth. And I'll tell you what, he looked amazingly like one of us. God in our skin. And look at this. Again, Isaiah writes, he says, now he's talking about the Messiah, 700 years before Jesus. He will be despised and rejected, a man of sorrows, acquainted with deep grief. We will turn our backs on him and look the other way. Yet it was our weaknesses he carries. It was our sorrows that weigh him down. And we thought his troubles were a punishment from God, a punishment for his sins. But he will be pierced for our rebellion and crushed for our sins. Look at that phrase, man of sorrows. For the longest time, I could not understand why was Jesus called a man of sorrows. But then it finally occurred to me, oh my gosh, it's my sin that breaks his heart. It's my stuff that creates his grief. He's the only one who can make payment to cover my spiritual rebellion and anarchy. His sorrow and grief was me. It was me. Predicted 7 centuries before the birth of Jesus. God promised that he would become vulnerable like one of us, that he would push against the darkness of this world. And then decades after the death of Jesus, the book of Hebrews says, because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross. Joy? Are you serious? It's the joy, the relief. It was his peace knowing that the cross was the only way that my sin could be met head on and paid in full. Do you know what the greatest sounds are coming from a delivery room? It's not the grunts and groans of a mother trying to push a 7.5-pound human out into this world. It's not the OB doctor shouting, push! It's not even an anxious dad encouraging his wife, come on, you can do this. No. The sweetest sounds in this world are the first cries of a newborn baby. And those cries just echo through the ages. It's a brand new life. Happens 385,000 times in this world every day. You'd think we'd get used to it, wouldn't you? But when this baby cried, it was a signal. Darkness started to tremble that night. This baby came to shine light into the darkest places on our planet and the darkest corners of our sin-infested hearts once and for all. And now, fast forward, watch this now. Fast forward from that manger in Bethlehem, fast forward 30 years. This baby become Messiah, Savior, Redeemer, and King. He cries for the last time. We were there when he cried the first time. He cries for the last time so that everybody will know that his work has been done. It is finished, he said. Papa, I did it. I accomplished what you sent me here to do. And what that means, Christmas means that God didn't throw up his hands. God was not exasperated with his creation. God didn't walk away from us and said, hey, you go figure it out for yourself. No, the promise keeper had arrived and he connected all the dots. This Christmas will likely go down as the strangest one in our lifetime. I get that. We've all had to modify and make adjustments, but even with all the corona precautions and distractions, I want you to hear this. I want you to hear it whether you're here or in the space, or for those of you who are watching from maybe hundreds of places. If God is telling the truth, if this story is the real deal, and I believe it is, then when God keeps this promise, it just increases my confidence that I can trust him for all the other promises that he made. When God says, if you seek me, you will find me, I'm believing it. When God says, if you need forgiveness, come to me and I'll set you free, I'm going there. When God says, nothing in this world can separate us, once you are in my hands, I'm all in. When he says, I will never forsake you, I'm counting on that one. When God says, if you're tired of running from me, remember that I welcome runaway prodigals back home. I'm celebrating that. Our King has arrived. And even if you have a December to remember new Lexus in your driveway this week, this news is better. The King has come and is here. I read a great story recently about a moment, and this happened almost all the time in these ancient battles hundreds of years ago. There was an epic moment in all battles when the front lines would break down and the front lines would be penetrated by the enemy, and it was evident that all hope was lost. And in that moment, everything was going to pivot on one thing. Would the people rally around the King? I don't know what you're celebrating this Christmas. I don't know what you're facing. I don't know what you might be dreading. But what do you say? We rally around the King of Kings. Could it be that maybe that's what Christmas means after all, that people gathered around the King? And maybe if we get a little closer to him, maybe what we'll see is a promise-making, promise-keeping God who connected all the dots across all the ages. That's where we live. We live on a beautiful blue ball suspended in outer space, revolving around a relatively small star that we call the sun. We live in a small corner of the Milky Way galaxy. I always appreciated this simple question that was written about 3,000 years ago in the Old Testament book of Psalms. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, why are people even important to you? Hey, did y'all get to see the great conjunction on Monday night? I hope you did. Jupiter and Saturn. 551 million miles from us. We can get there in 6 years in a conventional spacecraft. Now, if we could travel at the speed of light, 186,000 miles a second, we could get there in 43 minutes. If you could take off right now tonight from a special spaceship, if you were traveling at the speed of light, it would only take you 5 hours to get to the edge of our galaxy where Pluto used to hang out. Poor Pluto. He got demoted. If you continued out into the darkness of the universe, and let's say that you keep going for 100,000 more years at the speed of light, you would finally get to the edge of the Milky Way galaxy that we call home, just one galaxy among billions. Astronomers will tell us that if we travel another 4 billion years at the speed of light, we will finally get to the edge of the known universe. My friends, those are not stars. Those are galaxies. There are billions of galaxies with billions and billions of stars. Why would God create all of this and then zoom back to there? And there's only one answer. There it is. Love is the only explanation. This God who came for us, made room for us, this Savior, rescuer, redeemer. And if it's all true, and I believe it is, then this was the moment that changed everything. Christmas is the celebration of when God connected all the dots from all those promises. Once and for all, he broke into our story and everything started to change. We have to decide, what are we going to do with it? So what if we all made a little space for this story in our story? Now, some of you have intellectual doubts. I get that. But what if you made just a little room to take another look at the evidence? Some of you have failure in your life and it troubles you, and some nights it torments you. What if you made some room for the immensity of God's mercy? And what if you accepted his forgiveness and his promise when he said, I will not only forgive your sin, but I will forget that it was ever there. I tell people all the time, listen carefully, you ought to write this down. If you think your failure is bigger than God's grace, that's your second mistake. Maybe your life has been drifting and you're thinking that it's too late. You just cleared off a space on the deck of your life for the God of the second chance. Some of you are really close to giving up on a relationship. In fact, there might be somebody in this church and you're just waiting till after Christmas, just next week, and you're going to pull the plug on a relationship. You might be missing somebody in a big way this Christmas. Nobody can make it feel right. Some of you are trying to manage a sadness that some of us in here are unable to comprehend, and there's a lump in your throat and there's a pain piercing your heart. If you could stand in front of a mirror right now and look at your heart, it would look like a piece of shattered glass. But what if you made some space for a God who really is bigger than the pain? His name is Jesus. He is the bright and morning star, the chief cornerstone. He is the Lamb of God and the Good Shepherd. He is the Son of God and the Mighty One. He is the way, the truth, and the life. Lord of all, the victorious one, light of the world, our Jesus. And 2,020 years ago, he came to us so we could see up close what God is like. I'm asking you to consider, what would it mean if you seriously made some room for him? Some of you have a blessed life. I understand that. Even with COVID and sheltering in place and all of the other distractions this year like none other. But what if you made a little space for him? And then what if you said, and God, I'm going to give you all the credit. We believe that God is not finished with the story. It's his story intersecting with our story. I understand the next couple of days are going to be different than all the Christmases before. Maybe a lot different, I don't know. But can I remind you that the King is here. He kept his promises, connected all the dots, and he can be trusted. When God wrote himself into our story on that tiny blue ball suspended in the darkness of the universe, things started to change. He taught us how to love each other. He broke the chains that held us captive, and everything started to change. It's as if we were there in that unassuming first century village of Bethlehem with nobody watching but a few unlikely visitors. And we got to look inside that temporary excuse for a baby crib, and we wondered, is this baby destined to be a king? Is this really God connecting the dots? And then he looked back at us from this unusual place to find a great big God. And in the words of one of the celebrated Christmas carols of all time, O Holy Night, O world broken, dark, hurting, and hoping, we looked into the manger, and for the first time our soul felt its worth. And then, from that improvised manger cradle, he spoke back to us and to the whole world. And he said, it's your move. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Oh, holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared, and the soul felt its worth. A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. Fall on your knees, oh, hear the angel voices, oh, night divine, oh, night when Christ was born. Truly he taught us to love one another. His law is love, and his gospel is peace. Chains shall he break, for the slave is our brother, and in his name all oppression shall cease. Sweet hymns of joy in grateful chorus raise we, let all within us praise his holy name. Christ is the Lord. Oh, praise his name forever. Oh, night divine, oh, night when Christ was born.
What a holy night that was indeed. Now, now's the time you want to go ahead and grab a candle or your cell phone or anything in your house that would light up your space as we sing a silent night together. And usually, in years past, there's thousands of people all together in one space over several services that are doing this, but now we're spread miles and miles apart, and I kind of like the idea of that. So I want to invite you to do something as we do light up our spaces, and as you sing Silent Night together with us. I want you to ask yourself a question. Think about that message you just heard and ask yourself, is this the time that I should move towards Christ? Is this the time I should take a step towards him? Maybe this is the very first time you've ever considered that Jesus is who he says he is, and what he came to this earth to do, he did just for you. And that's the truth of the matter, that Christmas is all about Jesus coming for you. He did that just for you. So I want you to consider that and pray for that as we sing Silent Night together.
tender and mild. Sleep in heavenly peace. Sleep in heavenly peace. Silent night, holy night, Son of God, love's pure light, radiant beams from thy holy face. With the dawn of redeeming grace, Jesus, Lord, at thy birth. Jesus, Lord, at thy birth.
For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever.
Shepherds quake at the sight. Glory streams from heaven afar. Heavenly hosts sing hallelujah. Christ the Savior is born. Christ the Savior is
What a beautiful night. And thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to invite you to do something. If you, in your heart, you took a step towards Jesus tonight, if you moved towards Him, I'm going to ask you to do something. We have a free gift that we'd like to give to you. I mean, after all, it's Christmas, right? What would Christmas be without gifts? If you took a step towards Jesus tonight in your heart, here's what we'd like to do. Just go ahead and just text the word MOVE, M-O-V-E, to 64600. M-O-V-E, MOVE to 64600. And just fill out some basic information, and we're going to mail to you a free gift. No strings attached. And also, if you're new here tonight, if this is your very first time joining us at St. Mark's Church, you can do the very same thing. Just text MOVE to 64600. We'll give you that very same gift. And just as our way of saying thank you. And also, we want to be a help to you. I mean, that's why churches exist, is to help people along with their spiritual journey. So make sure you do that. Hey, also, this Sunday is an online-only service. You can join us at 9 or 11. It's a very special one. So go ahead and join us. No services on campus. Just join us online right at the same place you're joining us here today. And we can't wait to see you at our very last service of the year 2020. So from all of us here at St. Mark's Church, man, we wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.